Hey, Jamie.
Hi, Salamander.
Hey, thank you for joining us, Boo. How are you? How are you doing today?
I'm great. Thanks for having me. How are you?
All right. Now, would you mind letting the audience know a bit about what do you do in Memphis?
Yes, I'm a public interest attorney. I'm in Shelby County in Memphis, and I work at obviously Memphis Public Interest Law Center, which is a nonprofit public interest law firm designed to fill the gap in legal services in the Memphis area. And so right now what we're doing to fill the gap is called the Housing Project, which is designed to address the rental housing crisis through renter-centered education, advocacy, and research.
Okay. Can you describe the emotional, atmosphere of their environment working around evictions in Memphis?
Yeah, so there are a range of things going on, but I'd say for purposes of today, and the most widespread emotion is obviously a lot of fear and a lot of people who are overwhelmed, not knowing what to do. So Memphis, there was a national report that was published that said Memphis ranked number 3 in the country for the number of evictions filed during the pandemic. And anyone who's watching the headlines will see that there's a backlog of close to 10,000. And the courts, I think, opened up today, considering the moratorium was just overturned in West Tennessee through a judge's ruling handed down just a week or two ago. So I think there's a lot of fear, and a lot of our systems are overwhelmed by what's going on with the rental housing situation.
Oh, yes, I can imagine. We understand that Tennessee tenants laws are usually complex. We have different rights depending on where you live in the city or county. Could you talk about that confusion?
Sure, yeah. So depending on the size of the county you live in, different laws may govern your rights. So in Shelby County, and let me put that disclaimer out there, I practice my whole time as an attorney in Shelby County. So what I'm most familiar with is the Uniform Residential Landlord and Tenant Act. Sometimes people call it URLTA. Sometimes people say URLTA or URLTA. Same. I'm told in Kentucky they say it URLTA or something slightly different. But if you live in a county that has this is by statute, that has over 75,000 people as of the most recent census, then URLTA applies to you. Okay. If you don't live in a county with over 75,000 people, you don't have the protections of the URLTA. And there are better protections in URLTA. So there are other laws that apply, not least of which is the common law. But the primary one in Shelby County and the one that has the best protections is the Uniform Residential Landlord and Tenant Act.
Okay. Exemptions under the URLTA, landlords are supposed to give notice of intent before filing an eviction. But we've noticed in some leases, the right is waived. If that's the case, what other scenarios should renters be aware of and within their lease?
Gosh, there's a lot of things. I don't know that I can go over all of it today, but just to make sure that we're speaking clearly, landlords have to give notice regardless of whether or not you're governed by URLTA. But the protections around improper notice and precisely what's there may differ county to county. I've only practiced in Shelby County. And under URLTA or under the common law, you can, in your lease under contract law, waive your right to that notice. So what renters should do with regard to that is make sure you have read your lease carefully. Okay. And if you want, you could try to negotiate that term. I don't, the power dynamics are such that I don't know, but it's worth an effort. But if you can't negotiate it out of your lease, be aware that it's in there and try to, work with your landlord and communicate so that you're aware of problems and are able to remedy it, because you won't have that notice provision and that extra timeline that it affords you.
Okay, that's interesting. On the point of retaliation, we have seen property managers and landlords carry out various forms of retaliation. If they see or hear attempts to organize, what advice do you have for tenants to, continue to organize?
So first and foremost, it's important that everyone understand that under the law, it is illegal for landlords to retaliate against you for doing anything to enforce your rights. So that would include organizing.
Okay.
So if a landlord attempts to do that, they're the same steps you do with any of your rights. Know your rights and you can do that through organizing with other tenants, through accessing the law, try to enforce your rights. And the other thing you can do if you don't know those rights, or you don't know where to go, or you don't know how to enforce those rights, you can contact the bar associations in your local area. You can contact the local legal aid, and there's a network of public interest law firms that serve every county across Tennessee called Legal Aid, and you can call them, and they all have different priority projects. but you should always call legal aid. They are there to help. And as a last resort, in Memphis Public Interest Law Center has a website that's renter-centered and education and advocacy centered. So even if you are not in my county, you can always reach out to mpilc.org, hit one of the contact boxes, and I will do my best to use my network to find out what laws are applicable and what renters are organized where you are.
Okay, that's very interesting. Thank you. For someone who's looking to be a renter in the state of Tennessee, what advice would you give them?
So the most important thing I would say is to read your lease. Make sure, well, this is outside of the scope of a lawyer. This is practical advice, but make sure you know what you need and what you can afford. But once you get to the part where you've done your work and the law starts to matter, you need to read your lease and you need to understand your lease and know what's in there. Don't sign a lease with any blanks. If you have any questions, use those same resources, tenants who are organized around you, legal aid organizations, bar associations that may have volunteer attorneys. Make sure you've read the entire lease, because a lease is a contract and all the weight of a legally binding contract attaches to that. So don't ever hesitate to ask questions and find out what the information means, and try to negotiate with your landlord. And if you can't, just make sure you're aware of what you need to do. Okay,
thank you. Now, we kind of sometimes know as a theme, we live in a system that everything's interconnected. But would you say there is a relationship between voting rights and the rights of tenants in our state?
I would say there definitely can be, to the extent that different states and different jurisdictions have different procedural requirements for where you register, how you register. But regardless of any of that, to the extent to activate your right to vote, you need an address to identify or to register, or at which you can receive mail. If you are housing insecure and don't have an address, then you obviously can't enforce those rights very easily.
Okay. So you would say disenfranchisement in one's disenfranchisement in another?
I think it can be.
All right. Yeah, true that. All right. Thank you for answering that. That was something I wanted to touch on. What sources are available for those who are being evicted? Like a mother of three living in a car. What does she do? What can she do?
So that's going to differ county by county, and I think you guys are going to post even more information about it than I'm aware of, since I'm just Shelby County. I think your next guest has some information about across the counties. But as for Shelby County, you've got home901.org. Wait, am I saying the right one? Let me get to the right. Is that on the bottom yet? Yeah. home901.org/COVID resources. So you can go to that website. You can also text home 901 to 21000. Or if you're a Spanish speaker, Casa 901 can also be texted to 21000. Those should all be self-prompting. You should pop up on the website. And once you text, it should self-prompt you. And then in the event you can't remember any of that in Shelby County, you can call 211. And that should also get you there.
Okay. That's interesting. That's very helpful and very insightful. And I'm pretty sure it can get help. Yes?
I forgot to say one really important thing.
Yeah.
So whatever the need is, so I think those were specifically linked to rental assistance and utility assistance, but those resources, because a bunch of folks, city, county, nonprofits, I think even some private entities have come together to really focus on this crisis. If you have any related problem, I would recommend you call or text or go online, and they can link you up with attorneys. They can link you up with other parts of our government and nonprofit structure, even if it's not rental or utility assistance you need.
Okay. Is there anything to special needs to qualify, or a list of qualifications to apply for these?
There are some eligibility criteria. It differs. The different sites are saying different things about whether or not you just have to attest to it in writing, just verify it and say, yes, this stuff is true, versus provide the documentation. So I can't speak to that specifically, but they do have eligibility criteria. I think COVID related hardship is the minimum. And then I think what they're doing is the most dire situations will get priority, and they're doing a couple of rounds with those. So if you aren't dire now, but you are later, you didn't make the mark, they'll automatically, if you've already registered, put you into the next round. So if you're about to get evicted, you'll obviously be in a dire category.
Okay.
That's how that system's going to work.
All right. Thank you for answering that. Thank you so much for your time and your expertise, Jamie. We hope you stick around for a roundtable discussion, later on in the program. You down for that?
Thanks for having me.
Sure. Now we'll take a brief commercial break. Are y'all ready to call Bill Lee? Check out these talking points we have compiled in the next video. And on you.